Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience and retention is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing with some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself from the stories my guests tell about the times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to follow us on Twitter at Customer Fanatics. That's customer and then Fanatix. And also just follow me on LinkedIn at Heather Younger. That is because I'm in the process of writing a book based upon this podcast, which will have amazing stories of those on the show. And I'm going to be going a little deeper too, so you will not want to miss it. But I'll be putting out tidbits, asking for feedback related to the book cover and just ideas and colors. I want you to be a part of that. I want you to lend your voice to that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at customerfanatics.com, and you'll get a couple freebies as well, including the first chapter to my book and some emotional intelligence tips as well. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you enjoy this show. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and today I'm really excited to have Larry Sutton on the show today. He was referred to me by actually another podcaster, and I asked that podcaster if she knew of any just really amazing leaders that would fit into the mission of this podcast, obviously mostly focusing on leaders who are mostly more emotionally intelligent and really do lead kind of people first. So, Larry, that's why you're on the show.
Well, thank you, Heather. I appreciate that very much. And that was kind for her to pass those words along. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
So where are you right now, Larry, in your leadership journey?
Oh, my goodness. That is a constant, ever-changing journey. I don't think you get the end of that until it's the end of everything, So that learning is like the key element of leading. And although I feel like I've matured immensely over the past 30 years, I never felt like I'm there. Constantly reading other things, considering other things and different directions. And for me, most of the time, it's my internal staff and my other leaders that kind of keep me going in that learning direction, So I just have to say, if it was a 2,000 mile race, I might be on mile 1,500. I'm not sure. You never know, because there's things you learn, and then there's things that you relearn because you knew them before you quit doing them, and so it's really a daily activity. I mean, a smart guy once told me that. He said, I like to learn something every day, and if I don't, when I go home, I go next door to the neighbors and knock on the door, and when they answer, I look at them and go, teach me something.
Oh, I love that. That is amazing. I kind of feel like when we approach life in a childlike way, that way, where we're just open to receive what's coming our way, I think our life is more fruitful, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I tell them, I'm often accused of having the mentality of a small child. And sometimes that's accurate because of what I'm doing. But I think that never ending approach to it. And I learned that, almost the hard way when I sold my first business and thought that I was in my late 40s and sold my first business and thought I wanted to play golf. So I bought a home and a golf course and played golf every day for the lack of nothing else going on. And about 6 months, I ended up hating golf, which before that, I loved golf. It was like my getaway and fun and everything. But and it really got on me. I mean, I don't want to say I got clinically depressed, but I was mentally depressed. Couldn't figure it out. What's going on? I should be happy if this is a time to enjoy. And then it just took a while to figure out that what I was missing was the learning that takes place in your journey. And the association and camaraderie of all the others that are going to be around you. So that was learning one lesson the hard way. You had to go through it to finally get back to it.
Now, what field are you in right now?
I'm in the tire industry, which is kind of amazing because up until the year 2000, I probably couldn't spell tires efficiently. So it just came out of nowhere, you know. It was, in my journey after I had sold my original business, which dealt with televisions, appliances, and furniture and things like that. I had gone through several types of businesses trying to get back to where I want to be, you know, find out who I want to be. And, you know, when I grow up, you know, because I don't think growing up ever really takes place. So I actually got in the smoothie business. I bought some smoothie franchises and, you know, found myself at 50 years old out in the corner of a shopping center dressed as a piece of fruit, handing out free smoothies to people, you know. Worst part is I made my kids do it too, and they were just looking at me like, Dad, come on. I don't want to be a grape, you know. But it turned out to be quite a bit of fun, but it didn't fit. And I tried another business. It didn't fit. And then I had heard about a business that sounded like it might fit. So I just got up, started looking at it and said, yeah, I could, that sounds like something that might work. So I started my current business in the year 2000. And, you know, funny enough, it was at the time more of just something to do and get back involved, and didn't really have an ending vision of where I wanted to take that or where it was going to be. It was really just, I got to find something and get back to it. And then once we got into it and started developing the vision of what it could be, it's just been incredible ever since. We, in our industry, we actually had reached the plateau of the 17th largest tire dealer in the U.S. Last year, which is when we opened our first door, that was not on our radar. You know, it just happened. You know, so with the hard work and a lot of good people dedicated to the cause.
Wow, you know there was a lot of stuff inside of that summary there. So when we think about, you know, leadership and how we lead our children and our families a lot of times first, and we either do a good job at that or we don't. And sometimes we put this, we put a value on what that looks like. We think, oh, we failed and that they're not going to learn good lessons. But I would say, based upon the journey you just shared with all of us, that was just some amazing lessons. I'd venture to guess that your kids are probably, if they're not entrepreneurs, they're just highly intelligent people. And probably aren't afraid of risk. They've been in it. They've been knee deep in it. So you taught them lessons of not of failure, but of that we just keep searching for what it is we're put on this earth to do. And once you find it, you stick to it. And so that's the first thing I heard. The second, and I'm going to give you a chance to talk about that. And then the second one was this idea of starting a venture, going down this road. Let's say you have a team that you're leading, and you aren't always 100% clear about where you're going, but you know that it's going to come to life. And I love that you included your people in setting that vision up. So I love all of it.
Oh my goodness. That's, when I was growing up, one of my early mentors was an uncle, and he said, one of his early lessons to me was, he said, son, let me just tell you what you need to realize and understand is that in order to be truly successful, you have to hire people smarter than you. And I looked at him and I said, man, this is going to be easy. That's going to be easy. I was born in Oklahoma. This is going to be a cakewalk.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, again, that is like that entrepreneur, journey, that journey, the desire to create and create something that has impact in the world. But also, there's this mission portion of it that I feel like I have a mission to do these things. And so I think it's great. I'd love to know now, based upon the success you've had as a leader in this business, what do you think that the people that are on your team, all the people that work for you inside of all the different locations, whatever, what do you think they say about you and your leadership style?
I think, first of all, they would say that he cares about us, because I think we demonstrate that efficiently and regularly and often. And it's important, and they feel more like family members. In fact, we often refer to them as team and family members. Second of all, I'd say they would say I was passionate, and third thing, I'd say he never told me anything that wasn't true.
That's powerful. Oh, I was in let's just say a meeting recently with a client, and one of the things that popped up was how some of the employees perceived that the leaders weren't always transparent. They weren't always
Right.
telling the people the truth. And so then trust started to go downhill in a really steep way.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
then productivity went down and apathy went up. And right, all of these things, these possibilities of, you don't really think that someone's ever going to leave the company, but when you talk to them, you see where they're at because of that lack of trust. Now, all of a sudden, leaving the company becomes a possibility in their minds where they didn't have it before they thought that people were being more transparent. So I appreciate you saying, he's never lying to us.
Oh, absolutely. That's tantamount to destroying your company, and when you're not transparent, nothing else works, because once you get caught doing that, whatever you say is not important and doesn't matter. And so your credibility is everything, all the way through and through. And so we're pretty adamant about it. I've often told, and again, my youngest son is our EVP. He just rejoined the company a couple of years ago after being very successful in his own business.
Yep.
And he often tells me he's going to design what's called a PR patch, meaning that when I'm in public or when I'm around my people and I just talk straight up normal like I normally do, he wants to put a PR patch over the logo and making sure that they don't know. I tend to be so blunt, and I've often told folks in staff meetings and everything else, listen, from time to time, I'm going to say something stupid, or I'm going to have the wrong idea. And what I expect from you is to stand up and slap the crap out of me and tell me I'm wrong, not sit back and tell me I'm right if you're thinking I'm wrong. And so oftentimes we'll get a quite spirited disagreement. And the reality is, if all your leaders are agreeing with everything you're doing or saying or proposing, you probably either have the wrong people or you've given them the wrong advice on how to work with you.
Boy, a lot of that. I mean, all of that is just really powerful when you think about this idea of feeling free enough to discuss countering views, conflicting views in a respectful way, not just with your coworkers, but with the person who owns a business or the person who manages you. That idea of psychological safety and just feeling safe inside of work, with you having those conversations where it gives them it's straight up, in a straight up, non-fluffy way, gives them the permission to call you on the carpet, of course in a respectful way, but still call you on the carpet to say, hey, this is not right. I just think that goes a long way. I mean, that trust building is just huge when you do that.
Well, they're not ever truly empowered if that's not the case. And if they're not empowered, they're never going to grow to be the best they can be. And so it kind of all goes hand in hand. If they don't have the freedom to disagree, that'll start chipping away at empowerment in everything you do. And with stores all over the place, you can't run them. One of my early partners called me over to his place one day. We had opened 4 stores together. And he called me over to Daytona and said, hey, we need to talk. And I said, okay, what about? And he said, I was wondering if you thought you ever wanted to grow. And I said, of course. We've already opened 4 stores. I want to grow, of course. He said, well, that's not going to happen unless you stop managing 4 stores and get some managers in place and let them manage. And I went, what are you talking about? He said, Larry, you're running 4 stores. You're managing 4 stores. You're not letting other people do their job because you're overseeing everything. And here's why, because you think you are the only one that can do it right. And he said, and that's a mistake. He said, they're going to make mistakes and they're going to learn from those mistakes, and that'll be a good thing. And so it was an early lesson in actually, my early business life that was probably one of the most valuable lessons I ever learned. That my gosh, I had a business meeting not long ago, back last week, and one of the guys was saying, it was another company that we were talking with, and they said, we like to fail fast. And what he meant by that is, we know we learn from failures. We just like to do it a lot quicker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's so painful.
And I thought, right? What a healthy attitude. I love that statement. We know we're going to fail, but let's fail fast and get it over with so we can learn what we need to.
Yeah, I think it would be just super painful. That's the issue. Okay, mm-hmm. So how many managers do you have in your organization?
Nationwide, we've got 123 general managers for stores. Got a plethora of regional managers over 6 to 8 store areas. And then, a couple of, it just kind of comes up the level. So you total it up, it's at least a couple of hundred.
Wow. No, that's a lot. That's a lot. And good for you. Again, when you see that kind of growth and getting that advice you got about letting people, fail. So the other day, oh gosh, my son, so I have 4 children, and my son was set up to be, he was very successful, doing very well in the school that he was at. And he just recently graduated from that school and was moving on to high school. And they give out an award to the graduating so basically every 8th grade class gets this particular award, and it's based upon people who are great in academics, great in service, and basically it's a faith-based school, and also great in their faith. Okay, so he was like a shoo-in. There was they usually do a girl and a boy, and he was a shoo-in. And right the last probably 2-3 months of the year, he just started to go downhill. He got accepted into the school he wanted to go to. He just decided that he was gonna just kind of take a break. Well, I was like beside myself because I knew that up to that point he had been just the person, the perfect person. But at the same time, I kept struggling as the leader of my family, right? As one of the leaders of my family, I kept struggling and thinking, wait a second, he deserves to get this. And then wait a second, but he needs to fail. He needs to feel the pain of him, being a childish person towards the end, and basically handing over his ability to kind of walk with this thing. And
I've been there.
Have you? I'm sure you got.
I got 4. I got 4 grown children, and if anybody ever asked me, what would you like to do different? I said, I'd like to do that over again, knowing what I know today. And listen, they're all good. They're all doing great. And but some of the pain they've gone through to get there, I could have, if I'd have been a little bit more knowledgeable of just what you're talking about, in letting them fail and letting them learn that way, if they could have gotten where they were quicker. They could have avoided some painful learning experiences. But, who knows if that's really painful learning experiences are oftentimes you learn the most from. So, it's just a platitude to say I probably would do it different. But given the results, everybody is a product of the mistakes they've made. So, and they're all in great place. So I got to say, maybe not. Maybe that's just a rethinking of it. I could have saved me some mental turmoil.
Oh gosh!
I know the feeling you're talking about. I want to pick them up and dust them off.
Yeah.
But
it's like, nope. I'm sorry. You got to feel it. Maybe you'll get a second chance to be that person, right? Maybe you'll get a second chance. And I think you will, right?
Absolutely.
So where does that drive to lead come from? Because obviously you've been having all these businesses and you wanted to grow something. And then where does the desire to lead kind of organizations and people inside those organizations to do great things?
I think probably just young influence. When I was going into high school, my mom was a single mom, and her brother called her and wanted her to move to Florida to help him run a company that he was starting. He was an entrepreneur. And so I had been out on the summers working for his business, And by the way, it was a TV and appliance business. And I was, on delivery trucks when I was 14 and that kind of thing. But I was kind of in awe of him because of his leadership and because others looked up to him and respected him and what he did and how he did it. And I'd have to credit that to that desire, just seeing him and admiring him. He was kind of my childhood hero. And so I think we all grew up wanting to be that. Even when we don't even know it when it's happening. I was playing in rock and roll bands. I thought I was going to be a rock and roll star, actually. So. But I think eventually that was the influence that. And I would be amazed by people coming in. I used to they would have sales meetings, and then you would have these people that were semi-famous in different industries come in and do these seminars and stuff. And I used to just be in awe of that and go, someday I want to be that. Someday I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy. That kind of thing. I think that's probably what it was.
Oh, that's great.
Funny enough, I've never thought about that. I'm glad you asked that question, because that's the first time I've ever been asked that question, and I'm like, yeah. Why did I do that?
Yeah, because I think we all have a why, and so, yeah, you're right. Sometimes we just don't consider it. And the work I do, I have to consider all that, right? Between speaking and the training and all that coaching, I have to know my why because I'm expecting others to know theirs. So it's easier for me to talk about it.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that is just super helpful on this podcast is for me to take leaders like you who obviously get it, but maybe you didn't always get it, right? Like we talk about micromanaging the 4 stores before you had all these multiple stores.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Can you think of a specific example, one be as specific as you can, when you were not the best version of yourself, you were not the best leader you could be? Describe that for everybody, and then tell us what you did to come out of that.
Well, not to be repetitive, but that was a rude awakening for me, and realizing that I hadn't empowered anybody and was just overlording and micromanaging and everything else. That was the big turnaround, and began a journey of being able to get into people's heads and talk to them and allow them to actually manage other people and try not to interfere and that kind of thing. But along the way, you get it all the time. I mean, I am passionate, and sometimes passionate overrides good sense. And, there's times when I've probably blown up. It's not in the last 20 years, but in the early part of my leadership, I probably was too expectatious of people's dedication and was not as much in tune with what they needed outside of work in terms of time with their family and things like that. So, again, I don't know that I could cite any one incident. I could probably sit here and think of a couple of hundred. Oh man, I messed up there. let me change that and go back. Impactful moments are interesting, but I can't think of like the major one, with the exception of that early lesson of, my gosh, let people do their job. Just sit back and let them do their job and show them what they did wrong and teach them. And now it's just natural. I mean, at this point, a perfect example of that is we have an online survey that we do with every customer that ever does business with us. And it's only 5 questions. And it basically, the responses, they either rank us, 1 to 5 stars. And so when we first started that, and I still to this day, I get a copy of every one of those responses comes to my phone. And so when we first started, I would take any one of them that was less than a 4, and if the customer expressed why they gave us less than a 4, well, I would pick up the phone and I would call that individual and say it was John. I'd say, "Hey John, how you doing?" It's Larry Sutton. He said, "Hey, how are you? What's going on?" He's immediately wondering why I'm calling. And I said, "Listen, I'm just reading this review here that John, that Teresa May sent in, and she said this happened." And he went, "Yes, sir." And I'd go, "Well, let me ask you a question. what could we have done different to not make her feel that way? And almost 100% of the time, they'll tell you the answer. And you don't have to tell me the answer. They already know the answer. And so they would give me the answer, the right answer. If they didn't, then I would say, well, what if we did this? That kind of thing. But most of the time they just give you the answer. And instead of, 30 years ago, I would have said, well, why didn't you do that? Then I learned that my statement is, let me ask you a question. Can I count on you in the future to always do that instead of what you did? And of course they're going to say yes. I said, well, thank you. It's been a great call. Thank you very much. And that'd be the end of it. And what I found out was very, very few times did I ever get a bad review on the same person. Once they knew that, hey, why don't I just do the right thing the first time? So I think it just becomes a natural, some of your learning things from early on just become part of your natural leadership style. And instead of admonishing, you're encouraging and teaching. And probably early on, I was more of an admonisher and less of a teacher. And so becoming a teacher was a big part of the leadership journey.
Love that. Interesting. And I always find that I learn, they teach me a lot, like equally as much too. So I feel like I'm learning, I'm teaching, I'm learning it. It's just like you talked about earlier, that journey of just learning. I'm teaching one thing, and then all of a sudden we go off one track, and I feel like now I've learned another thing, and it's just crazy how that works. I mean, even in this show, I'm talking with all these leaders, and you guys are teaching stuff.
It's never ending. It's just never ending. And that's listening to other leaders and getting with other people. Some of my friends run their businesses, and, we have endless hours of conversation of different things. And, you listen, and even if it's a different business, you'll go, wow, that's a neat concept. I doubt seriously if anybody alive today has ever come up with a unique idea.
Yeah, good point.
It's really, we get caught up in ourselves sometimes and go, oh yeah, look what I thought of it. And then you go 100 miles away and find out someone else has been doing it for 20 years, So you're like, oh, okay. There's no such thing as a new idea, because everybody's already thought of it,
And we get full of ourselves, right?
Oh, yeah. Oftentimes I find a lot of people that they know what to do. They just don't implement it. Everybody talks about, how important customer service is.
Yep.
Nobody wants to do a bad job on customer service, but oftentimes you'll find some of the people that talk about it the loudest don't implement or engage in enough activity to be sure that belief system is pushed down all the way to the bottom of your company.
Yeah, that's a big one. A lot of times just all of those things happen. So we get we do, retreats with our executive team. And then the expectation from the CEO is that maybe everybody else is going to go and give it to their VPs or their directors or whatever, how the organization is. And then there's this idea that we think we're just going to keep cascading that down, and everybody's going to know all the way to the person who's at the counter serving the customer. And what often happens is that does not happen, right? There's a failure that happens in that gap.
Absolutely.
There's that communication gap. And so all the things you're talking about, it rings so true. And even in the space that I am in, I'm mostly in the engagement, leadership, and loyalty space, employee loyalty. Although I started my career in the customer side of things, customer experience and loyalty, I moved over to this side. And it's the exact same thing happens is you aren't getting the people. You have the people up top going, I really believe this. And then you have that supervisor who is not supporting the employee, who doesn't then allow for this thing to happen.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So, the only cure for that, we run what we call an upside down pyramid. And that simply takes the organizational chart and turn it upside down. So that last person in our organization, in our case, it's the installers, putting the tires on the cars and putting them on there safely, because, hey, if you don't do that right, not only are we failing at giving good service, somebody could get hurt. And so our organization is and when we strive, and you can't just say you do this, because if you say you do it and don't do it, it doesn't work. You have to get everybody to believe that they are there to support the person that used to be underneath them. That person's now above you. And so your job is to support that person. So in our organization, the regional managers truly work for the managers, and the managers truly work for their salesmen and their people and that kind of thing. And when they don't feel that way, it doesn't work the right way. And so we're constantly, and let me tell you, that is a full-time job, keeping that in place, especially when you've got stores all over the country in different places, because the outliers, they think it's all about them, and you have to constantly have that. You have to have that belief system instilled so far down that I work for you. And then at that point, everybody in the organization knows that they're working for the customer. And so if you start with leadership working for the people that they're accountable to, and when I say, and on the right way, the way the world looks at it, the people that they're accountable for, we call it, those are the people you're accountable to, not for, And so it's just a different, it's a simple matter of looking at it a little differently, and then making sure that they're not just going through the corporate motion of doing it. They're actually doing it. They're actually serving as opposed to providing service.
Oh, I love that. We just brand that to get that across? Like, can you somehow just get that?
It is one of our brands.
But get it to everybody else. Yeah, it's in your brand, which is great. And
we don't own it. I say we live by that brand, and we actually have that. We actually have that as one of our purposes, and it's in every store. It's in everything we do. It's and it's simple. It's just serve, not service. And then of course you have to teach them what the difference is. And there is a big difference, because when you serve, you care. And when you're just providing service, you're just providing service. You don't really care. And so that's it's much deeper than that, but that's the way we roll it out. But it's in every store we have. It's one of our key tenets, and it's one of the drivers that we use. Little small platitudes can be just platitudes if you don't walk the walk. And so we're just big on, it's a platitude, but here's what it means. And if you don't live it, then you can't be a productive member of our team, because this is how we run our business.
So I'm curious to know, because you're obviously such a big organization now, how do you enforce that? Because often I hear this, and I even talk to my clients, and I'm talking to them or consulting them on the things that they need to do to create a better culture and to engage their people and all that. And of course, I've talked to them about a lot of things you're talking about. But a lot of times it's getting the buy-in from the executive team and all through the management team and HR, that they're going to find a way to enforce the lack of that behavior we're looking for. So if it's like they're not someone who wants to, if their heart's not in it, they're not looking to serve others, they are going through the motions. When you see someone like that, and anybody in your team sees someone like that, what are they allowed to do to fix that? What do they do?
Well, first of all, is you have to identify it and understand what you're looking at. And second of all, the first step would be to sit down and have a private conversation and say, I'm not sure you understand, what our mission is here really. And so let's go back and restate everything from the top down. It starts with, we a few years ago, we simplified our mission statements. If you read most, some of them are like books, and ours was a little bit long too. And one day it came up that, well, who can relate to that? And what does that mean? And so we have a tie-in. We start with everybody's mission is to be a part of the best. First of all, as a group, our mission is to be the best tire and wheel concept in America. On the surface, that sounds so simple, and so like what? But the reality is, there's so much depth to that, because that's a mission that every single person can measure their day by. That they can measure every event by it. And when they go home at night, they can look in the mirror and say, did the way I made that sale today, or did the way I listened to that customer today, or did the way I solved that problem, did all of that, all of my activity today, is that what it would look like if I was going to be an important part of the best tire and wheel concept in America? So it's an easy, measurable, repeatable deal. It applies to everything we do. Mm-hmm. And then as a result of that, how do we become that? Well, first of all, you become that by serving as opposed to service. And so then you explain the depth of that. And then the last part of that is all of us become changing lives. So everybody's mission really is the bottom of that, is to change a life. Now, ultimately, you're going to change the life of your consumers. But if you don't change the lives of everybody that led up to that consumer, that live's not going to be changed. So it's a 3-step process. And so when someone, first of all, you got to know who you're hiring is able to understand that concept and implement it. And so we do DISC assessments.
Okay.
And they're not biblical. They're not, that just because the DISC says this. We use the DISC assessments to help us place people in the right position that they're most prone to succeed at. Because just because someone isn't succeeding in one area doesn't mean they might not succeed in another. And if you've at least got a head start of knowing what they're most predisposed to be successful at, you get the best chance at their success. Mm-hmm. And so we're pretty emphatic about, trying to hire the right person, and nobody's going to get that right every time. That's impossible. But at least if you're trying to weed through to the people that are going to be most susceptible to your message, and so we try to make sure people have an open mind. We're careful in explaining the mission. We're all from a leadership position. We're all of the ones that are in the highest leadership positions are all believers. We're Christians. Mm-hmm. We don't carry Bibles, and we don't require that everybody be a Christian, and we don't, but we don't hide the fact that what our beliefs are, and what our real mission is. And so, these days you got to walk around, crystal circles sometimes with
yeah.
political correctness. But
yes,
we pray before company meals and at meetings, before we do awards banquets, and before anybody eats, we pray. And if nobody wants to pray, well, they can get up and leave. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't be with us. It just means that we want to live our lives as examples to others, and we're going to make mistakes, obviously, because we're human beings. But so we try to approach everything from that level.
I love it. That's good. When you start off strong like that, and with a strong belief, strong purpose, strong mission, united, and everybody's bought in, and they see how it's connected, it makes all the difference. We fail at that often.
Absolutely. And one of the things I learned from one of the leaders in this industry, I read his book, and it was an eye opener for me, because one of his policies was not firing people. He called it resetting people. So when someone made a mistake, when a manager made a mistake in one store, rather than let that person go, it might have been his third mistake. He wasn't going to fire anybody for one mistake, but it might have been the third time, and he got to the end of the rope and it was time to make a decision. Rather than letting him go, he would very much had a belief in a resetting system, meaning we're going to go in and identify and really give them some counseling, and then we're going to take them to a different location, in a different environment, in a different store, and see if that reset works. We're going to try. Nobody gets fired without getting a chance to reset. And so I read that in his book, and I just bought in. I mean, I was like, wow, that's fantastic, and that's amazing. And we've done that a couple of times and found tremendous results by letting people have another chance when they're at the end of their rope. And as long as we were absolutely convinced that they were sorrowful, they didn't want to, lose their job, and they want to learn and they want to get better, we give them a chance to reset. And we found some of those people become some of the most true believing, hardworking followers of the culture that in the group.
Love it. Oh, I love it. That's just amazing. Well, so for those who leaders that might be on the call and maybe even just struggling a little bit in their leadership journey, or they're just at a crossroads, I'd love for you to leave them with a pearl of wisdom or two that you might suggest they do.
Well, one, all of mine are just so basic. I start with listening. Every time is like, listen to what your people are telling you, and listen to what your customers are telling you. That it starts with listening, and then the oftentimes Uh, I tell people, for a long time in my journey, I didn't understand the difference in cockiness and confidence. And so I was coming across in my early career. I had quite a bit of success, and when you're immature, you start believing that that's about you. That it all happened because of you. That all of this good stuff is happening because you're good at what you do, and you get caught up in yourself, and you start believing it was you. And forget that it was everybody around you and all of the things. And I'll be straight up with you. I was, there was probably a lot of people thought I was the cockiest guy they ever met in their life. Because I was probably, I hadn't yet learned what the difference was in confidence and cockiness. So I think it's very important that every leader, learn that. One of my early mentors said, to me early in life, and I didn't understand it at the time, but I sure do today. And he said, "You're going to be great when you learn humility." and again, at the time, I was like, "What are you talking about? Get out of here!" But it was only 25 years later that I realized, wow, that was profound. It wasn't him putting me down. It was him trying to tell me what a powerful tool humility was in life. What a powerful tool that forgiveness is in life, and what it does for you, and how selfish forgiveness really is, as opposed to being generous. Forgiveness is not about forgiving about the person's well-being; it's about yours. And how powerful a tool sorry is, and how all of those things come into play. That's just the pearls you pick up along the journey.
I love that. Well, I definitely appreciate it. That's awesome.
Yeah, only if you're listening.
Yeah, good point. And I do agree that everything starts with listening. And then, when you talked about everything being basic, I have people say that a lot. My first book that I wrote had the word intuitive in it. And so a lot of the things I talk about are basic, but that is because great leadership is not rocket science. It's all the things you talked about and more. It really is basic.
Thank you. I'm so glad you just said that.
Like, you don't have to be innovative in leadership, right? You just got to get the basics really, really well.
And that's the exact reason you can never be cocky about it, because all it is just practicing the basics and making sure you stay on them consistently all the time.
Yes.
That's really all it is. People say that must be hard. Well, it's hard to get yourself out of the way, but once you do that, wow, then all of a sudden great things start happening. And I was driving down the street one day with one of my franchisees, and he's very successful, and we're good friends, and we often kid each other about who's blessed more. And so we're driving. This was a true story. We're driving down the street in the truck, and we're having that argument again. He says, "Well, I'm more blessed than you." No, I'm more blessed than you. No, I'm more blessed than you. And I finally look at him and I say, "Well, okay. You may be right, okay, but I deserve it less." And he looks at me and he goes, "You got a point there."
Oh, that's great. Oh, I love it. Oh, I could talk to you for a long, long time. This is some really good stuff. And okay, so for those who are listening right now, I hope you found great value in my conversation with Larry. I just think there's a lot
you're
of
awesome. I love it. I love what you're doing, and sharing this kind of information. You can't do it too much. There's a lot of people out. There's a lot of leaders out there that are going to hear any message if and the way you are obviously believing things, the way you're doing things. So I'm sure you're probably changing a lot of lives just by the podcast and by the different people that you have on, and I think that's the basis of everything we do. When at the end of all of this, ain't nobody going to count your houses, your cars, or your money, or any of the things you've done, but they will count the lives you've changed. And so that, I think that's really at the end of the journey. If you can look back and say, that's your bag full of success stories.
Oh man. Hey guys, anybody, all the listeners out there, please do share this episode because this is really amazing stuff. Make sure that you share it and tell all your friends about it. And of course, change as a result of the process. Change as a result of what you've heard, right? That's what this is about. So I appreciate you listening. And of course, Larry, thank you as well for being on here. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Heather. It's always fun talking about this kind of stuff. It's and I've learned a couple of things just talking to you. So that's always time well spent.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.